Welcome back to another edition of History in Your Own Backyard. I'm Susie Selleck. Today we are in Milton, Indiana, and I'm joined by Alan Paul here at what's soon to be the former Milton School. Alan, thanks for joining us.
Yes, glad to be here.
Can you first off just start telling us about the town of Milton itself? Back in the 50s and 60s. Go ahead and just, if you can elaborate on that, that would be great.
Well, it was a farming community. A lot of the students here were farmers. Their parents were farmers. I think there was about 458 in the town, meaning total population. Okay. And a lot of the parents did work in Connersville at Ford Philco. So there was one large supplier of jobs, then the farming area, and then as we had talked, the school virtually was everything.
Yeah.
Everything took place here.
Yeah. So, and I would love for you to be able to talk about that a little bit. Like, what would aside from it being a school, what was the purpose? What else it was used for? A lot of social events, that kind of stuff.
Yes, it was used for everything. They would have band concerts there, of course, basketball games. We had a ball field over here for baseball. Baseball was big in Milton too during the summer months. Yeah. So small sports, but the school itself was everything happened here. If they had FFA meetings, or they would have some type of a supper, or one of the lodges would have something, a lot of times it'd be right here in the cafeteria.
Okay. Now, we had talked earlier. Now, you went here in the early days. Can you talk about your experience that?
Yeah, I was here from, I actually started in about 58, and I would have graduated from here in 63. And 63 was the last class to go out of this building. So it was a wonderful experience. It's almost surreal. The story, Andy of Mayberry that's on television is very typical here of the problems that people had compared to today and all of the turmoil in the world. This was kind of a little compact unit and dealt with day-to-day problems just in Milton or following the Cincinnati Reds or whatever. Right. It was so different than it is now, and just living is the problems.
So take us back a little bit, because I find that time that you're speaking of kind of fascinating, where on a Friday night there was a basketball game, and I would love for you to actually be able to talk about the structure itself inside this school, but I would also like for you to elaborate a little bit on that time frame for people who are unfamiliar with how there was a local, heroing of young boys and putting them up on a pedestal after a Friday night game.
Oh yes, no, and Friday in general, at lunch it would start, and then you begin to get ready for the ball game that night, and especially if it's against like Cambridge City or someplace local, Hagerstown, that this would go on. The rest of the day, they would have a pep rally. The band here was very important. Most students were in the band. Yeah. So they would recruit everybody. Somebody would be fitted to a drum or whatever. And then the Mr. Smock was our leader. Then he would train you on that instrument. It was amazing. And we would march around town getting ready for the different functions that we would go to, and all the people would come out and sit on their front porches and so on and watch us march. But Friday night was beyond anything. You would come early, and of course as little kids run the halls and slide up and down with no shoes on and just terrorize everybody, And then the band would play. There would be a B team game also. Okay. Some of the guys would get to dress for, we call it the bigs. In other words, you get to honestly wear a big-time uniform for Milton. And and then afterwards even, people didn't want to leave. They would be around here. There would sometimes be fights with local people out in the streets here. So, break out about the ball game or what happened. But then these people would, the next Monday, would be like gods, because it was 2 days after the game, and then you'd see them, and you'd see them in the upper halls. Again, you have the downstairs and upstairs, and that's how the grades were busted out. Okay, yeah. So the upstairs was the high school.
Okay. Now, you talked earlier about the actual size of the gymnasium and how that was, and to me, I would imagine that was to be very loud. Was that the case?
It was very loud. My mother said bust her eardrums. Not only the school section, but the local people and the parents were just fantastic. And the teams would sit in the front row of seats, which may still be there, I don't know, but they would sit in the front row. There would be a space, and then it actually was up on a riser. It was like on a stage.
The game was up.
Which some people can't quite picture. But the problem was sometimes they'd miss a ball or go after it, slide down, and fall into the crowd. The gasping, the yelling, the limping, and then back up onto the stage, and they'd all cheer, for the guy. I remember Bob Curlin I used to kid him. He was always going off the stage, and it presented quite a picture. But very small gym. You can stand at one end and throw the ball and hit the wall. I can remember at that time, though, being a young kid, a guy named like Don Sweetwood would shoot maybe halfway down, and he'd shoot a shot, and because of the curtains above this area, the ball would disappear, and I was go in like that. Everybody, wow, like that. Sometimes we wouldn't by a point. It was really something.
So on Monday morning, these guys became heroes, and basketball, obviously, around the town was something that was, kind of revered. You'd say that, right?
Oh, yes. No, that was it. Basketball was very important here, and they had good teams. And like I said, they beat Richmond in '54.
Alan, when the school was getting ready to close down, there's a neighboring town that was going to absorb this student body. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, Cambridge City was the school that absorbed Milton, and a lot of discussion. You got to remember they were the kind of arch rivals, sports-wise, for us, and then it became, what would happen to our basketball players, and would they be able to participate in Cambridge, or would there be a prejudice against them? Yeah. But I think it was all overcome very quickly because we had some fine ball players, and they were absorbed into the Cambridge system. And I think Cambridge had a pretty good record after that.
So once that happened, what happened here to this building, what happened to the town, and what was the time frame right around then?
Well, what happened was when they pulled this out, of course, the town disappears. Right. Then you only have one thing left in a small town usually, and that's the fire department, which is here. We do have a fire department. And so all of the other activities kind of go by the wayside, and that's what happened. So it kind of just guts the community. But then it was started again as a grade school. And I know that the school corporation put a lot of money into this building at one time. I mean, millions. I think they dropped about $4 million in it to completely restore this building for a grade school. Okay. And it was kind of funny. I was in state government then, and they would come to me and talk about it, doing it, and they needed money for the Cambridge group to have the money to absorb it. But this grade school, they put all that money in, and I think they were only here maybe 2 years, and then it closed, which is kind of interesting. And now it's, of course, run down, but all that money was placed, like the windows were all changed. Everything was redone. Right.
Oh, yeah. I mean, just from what we've seen left, of the kitchen and that kind of stuff, yes. This looks like fairly up-to-date kind of stuff in the infrastructure. Yes.
And then you see later it became an antique mall, and he had a singer's bluegrass festivals here.
Country music.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so the dressing rooms downstairs and the stage became strictly a stage for music.
Okay.
And bands, rock and roll groups, stuff like that. And he had food here in the cafeteria, and I think the Amish did the cooking of all the pies and all that. And so a lot of people would come from around this area to go there for lunch. I'd sometimes stop down here and go in, and it would be full. There'd be a lot of people eating.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's pretty amazing food. If you're recruiting the Amish in to make you the baked goods, yes, I would be here too.
And there was quite a kitchen in the upstairs for the home ec area.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Now you see, in those days that was a big deal. Yes. And so you'd smell all these cookies being cooked and that stuff during the day. It was really neat up there, all this stuff being done,
Now, were you here? There was I'm under the impression that there was an auto body kind of like room as well as like science labs, and that's pretty innovative for the time. So were you around for any of that?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
we had a nice science department, well done, and also for, like you say, automobiles,
Yeah.
crafts, working with farm instruments. The FFA was very strong here, and they had their own area, and then they would have studies of all types of animals and so on. So yeah, it was all up to date. It really was quite a school, and many of the graduates went on to universities, and I think their graduation ratio here was quite good, honestly, of going on and doing other things. Some went to work. There were jobs then locally where they could go and work 30 years and retire. So the school produced a lot of interesting alumni, I think.
Point in case, right here, Alan Paul. So this building is unfortunately getting ready to be demolished.
Yes.
Can you talk about the time frame in which that's happening?
Well, I understand it's tomorrow that they're going to take it down. It probably won't take long. It's not very big. They're going to try to save the historical pieces, I guess, out of it.
Good.
And make a park here.
Okay.
And I think that's wise. We've talked about it for years. Again, in the legislature, I had some bills that would make it a park and so on. But I think this is the way to do it. They bought it, I think, for $1 or something, and so there's nothing invested. But I think they're going to save the door.
Okay. Yep. We talked about that.
Yeah, and try to make kind of a little place there where they have a plaque and have when the school was built and torn down.
Alan, in 1985, one of the third grade classes planted a tree in the loving memory of Brenda Boyles, who unfortunately died of cancer. Now, that tree, is there any chance for salvation there where it could be replanted possibly?
Oh, I'm told that they're going to. I think they're going to move them from in there out along here, along the road.
Okay, so next to the sycamore tree.
Yeah, and I know they're going to put a plaque up. I've been told that. So it'll be a nice memory for her, plus kind of buffer that out a little bit.
Very nice. Thank you. Thank you for watching another edition of History in Your Own Backyard. I'm Susie Selleck, and today we are in Milton, Indiana, here with Alan Paul. Alan, thanks again for joining us today.
Thank you. Glad you had me.
So remember, travel
Travel
slowly
slowly
and
and
stop
stop often.
often. Bye for now.
Bye.